Oh, hey, Auroni. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic, thank you. It's really cold in New York today, and
Freezing.
I I actually really like it. As somebody who's from a very wet, humid, cold country, I like the dry, icy cold. I'm in my element.
Okay, okay.
I don't controversial opinion.
I would say it's a little too cold for me. North of 40 in the wintertime is the preference. I'd say over the last 20 plus years, I was a big critic of individuals that said they liked four seasons. I thought they were just trying to make the best of a bad situation, but I actually do now like four seasons.
Yeah.
The winter season's been quite appealing, but a little too cold out for me right now.
For people listening, it is -8. Well, between -4 and -8. I don't know the conversion on those temperatures for Fahrenheit, so apologies to the US. But what I believe is what 30, 20? Right?
30, I think our highs get into about 35 today.
Yeah.
Yesterday was a little bit colder, but yeah, you know.
There you go. I'm getting better at the conversions now that I've lived here for a bit of a while. And but the first question that I ask everybody is, how do you like your coffee in the morning?
Oof, coffee in the morning. Coffee in the morning first is a ritual. It is the start to my day. I have espresso black. I thoroughly enjoy it. Have a couple of cups throughout the day. Start to introduce things like cream and whatnot, steamed
Mm.
milk later, but the first cup of coffee is always black.
I love it. I've been noticing a pattern. There's two ways. Obviously, the hardcore black, and then the lattes and the creamers and things. But you're actually one of the first to go. We're gonna slowly change it as the day goes on.
I You're right. It's a little strange, but it's like my pseudo intermittent fasting that I try to apply. So,
Yeah.
right at the start, don't introduce the milk. Once I break the fast, the milk's okay.
Ah, see, that makes sense. And then does that help you just doing that fasting? Does that help you just be more productive in the morning?
Um, Hard, I would say so, right? I think in general, at least for me, depending on the size of the meal, it does slow you down a little bit. So, I'm not hungry in the morning, so it's pretty easy for me to kind of get to like 11:30, 12, and then start preparing lunch and then just get going from there. So, yeah, just a cup of coffee to get started works really well for me.
And I love it. I do exactly the same thing. I tend to, as it first thing in the morning, straight onto the black coffee, and I only break that fast around 11, half 10, 11 in the morning. And I find that works well for me and just my energy levels and my concentration levels. Like, I've already got enough cortisol in the morning. Like, I don't need to add a huge amount extra to my body for that little train to keep going. Now, speaking of productivity, speaking of focus, let's talk about what today's podcast is really going to be focusing on. What it's going to be about. It is going to be kind of food heavy, which is my favorite domain. What is it that you do, and why do you do it?
So actually, before we get started, I just wanted to preface and state that the comments and general feedback and the conversation today, the opinions that I'm going to express are solely mine as an industry professional. I'll share a little bit about my background. They're not representative of my full-time employer or any other organizations I'm affiliated with. So just wanted to start and state that. So what do I do exactly? So at my full-time role is leading a global open innovation function for a CPG conglomerate. Currently focused on just that, food CPG as well as food ingredients. And the main objective of my team and my specific function is to get external technology from the external environment from an open innovation standpoint into the internal system, the internal pipeline, product launches, so on and so forth. What I refer to as external technology runs across several different verticals. if you think along the lines of a CPG sense, this is like new ingredients, new process technology, package technology. We have fermentation programs, agricultural programs. We look into those spaces as well. And then just a kind of a catch-all for like digital products, digital solutions, software-based solutions, AI tools, smart tools, things like that.
And this is one of the reasons why I said I was like looking forward to this episode, because not many people know that my actual degree, university degree, is a food degree. It was heavily much more focused on the marketing, on the business side of things, but absolutely we did touch on innovation, packaging, supply chain. And my degree in the UK just before Brexit was happening, which then did actually impact the things I was talking about with regarding food, particularly in my final years, because there was I had real life events happening all the time, and what that actually were the implications of that from a business application standpoint. But you not only obviously you work for for the corporation, but you also do help other food startup businesses as well, being able to break that market and take all of that knowledge that you know and help them. Just tell us a little bit more about that and the work that you're doing there.
No, that's a great point. I mean, so the majority of my like professional career has been kind of in the MNC space, both in the CPG world, at companies like my current one, CJ Chejidong, as well as PepsiCo, but also in the B2B specialty ingredients space when I was at IFF. And actually, a lot of what I do today is taking that kind of aggregate experience and applying it in what I think is very unique ways. With all that experience, a few things. One, I had a lot of startup and scale-up engagement in various roles, right, throughout my 20 plus year career. And so more indirect engagements through my companies, but then more direct engagements from an advisory standpoint. So taking all the knowledge from what makes a big company tick, what they focus on, how they manage their portfolios, how they focus on both top line, bottom line growth, expansion, and then applying that and kind of distilling it down to much more smaller execution, startups, so on and so forth, and providing just general advisory, right, from the core business functions, how you should think about market research and concept development, marketing, brand activation, how to reduce that down to actual products, packaging propositions to realize a white space opportunity that you identified, how to scale that up in a commercial manufacturing environment, right, or the various stages of what that could look like. And then kind of the end of it is, how do you view channel development? How do you view sales and distribution? How do you connect forecasts to manufacturing capacity and kind of do that dance along the way to meet your growth objectives and overall business?
Absolutely. One of the things I really wanted to really we're going to pull out and tease today is growing a business is hard. All you've just listed off a whole ream of different things that you've got to, like, as a startup, they've got to be able to think about. And then I do say adding the food layer on top of that just completely, I just think it makes it harder, twice over hard. And the reason for that is I think you have far more variables around the product itself. Because one, when you get to the consumers, everything is around perception of taste and how that tastes for them. Again, I always like to give examples. Is I have a lot of allergies. And so my perception of taste is far, far, far different to, I would say, like an average normal person. And I do think, and I've got this is my opinion, I do think the free from market don't quite get that. I think they don't understand that if you've got allergies, your taste perception is different to the average person. And I do think it's non-allergen people who are doing the product development for the free from market, and they're missing a whole opportunity and mark there. And I know that because I was doing the food product development like 10 12 years ago in that free from world, but that's by the by. So that's one thing. You've got perception of taste and how that's perceived. then you've just got like shelf life, so you can have it like, even just trying to, as a startup, trying to work out like how many different batches of the product do I need to make, and then I'd coordinate that with your marketing and your sales, because if you don't, then you get spoilage of waste, and then if you've got more waste, you obviously got through more product. For example, I have a digital product as my business. That's never going to get wasted. It's always just going to be there, and I don't have to think about that. So I could ramble on about all these different layers and these different things, because people are kind of gonna get the gist of it anyway. But what are some of the common mistakes that most startups make? And we can keep that really towards like the ingredients or the packaging, or all of the different layers that's involved.
So actually, even before we get into that, I wanted to maybe just share some insights or confirmation. Actually, I think you covered it really well, and again, you have the background in this space. So when I think about innovation across different value chains, I fully agree that food innovation is extremely challenging. I'm going to try to highlight a few broad reasons for that. I think first and foremost is food's very intimate. The actual occasion, the consumption behavior. Individuals fall very much into a routine, how they eat. We talked about the coffee experience, right? That is a version of that, right? And you're just doing so many things over the course of the day, and the actual amount of occasions for food consumption behavior is limited, right? You're talking maybe 3 max meals and a few snacks throughout the day. So the decision-making process there is quick. It's more challenging to change it, right? Because again, you fall into those routines. So when you think about innovating in the particular space, you have to take that into consideration. I think the other key challenge to innovation in food, and I would even broaden it to fast moving consumer goods, is that they're meant to be affordable. It's just that they're fast moving. It's on an everyday basis. It's on a multiple occasions on an everyday basis. So when you think about the consumer retail price, your ceiling is quite shallow, right? On a per unit basis, you can only afford so much. I'm just making the number up, like $5 to $10 per unit, and you could put whatever unit you want into that, right? Just CPG level. So then all of the value left in the value chain, from farmers to ingredients to manufacturers, distributors, so on, starts from that point. So when you think about innovation potential, you need to fall within that constraint. So you might be able to do really innovative things in the food space, but you're going to hit headwinds on, can I change consumer behaviors to adopt my really new thing? And then even if I were able to do that, could I do it within the cost constraints of the value chain so it's affordable? One thing, just to give a counter to that, when I think about electronics, right, you can think about existential needs, right? Like, I'm struggling to find a taxi. Like, I need a better way to do this. Oh, here's an app that connects you with lots of drivers. It's like, oh, wow, I'm changing the way I'm doing this now and forever, right? It's completely different. And you've created value on a existential need, right? And a problem that you're trying to solve. And then the economics piece of it is more, it's more neutralized, right? You're not spending it on a yellow cab, you're spending it on an Uber driver. But you can introduce that and quickly change behavior. With food, that's less likely. And then when I think about the value chain cost constraints piece, you can never have like an iPhone level event, because regardless of how much you put into the ingredients, right, of a food, or in the situation of an iPhone, you're creating so much value, you're creating so much of a different consumption behavior that you can charge for that, right? This is now a $300 device because it is doing so many different things. It's a personal computer, social media, productivity tool, so on and so forth. And it's like, hey, I now need this forever. $300 works for me. Actually, $300 is maybe like a 20-year-old price. It's like $1,000 now. But with the food, you can come up with really innovative things, nutrition, taste, like you name it, free from, blah, 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 blah. At $5 to $10 per unit. I think those are some really key challenges to food innovation that I wanted to highlight.
Yeah, absolutely. I was gonna give you an example, and then the one that's actually like hitting square in my face is McDonald's. So what we're talking about here is we've just spoken about convenience. You talked about what is known, so what is known to that person's lifestyle in like their everyday diet already. We're talking about convenience, to prefer taste, and then when it comes to like the innovation side of it, and this is why McDonald's is really starking out to me the most, because if you go to McDonald's in Spain, France, England, America, there is different food innovations within each individual McDonald's. So, for example, my husband's gutted. We live in America, and he can't get his favorite chicken strips. You can only get them in the UK. You go to the Spain, you can get macarons. You can get macarons in the McDonald's, and if you go to Italy, you can get the gluten-free range as well. So each have their different things, but they are very centered around culture and what you get. Because why would you put a macaron in a McDonald's in the US? That's just going to fly over people's heads. But because in France and in Spain, it's so part of their culture and convenience and taste and they're gonna get their fries and then they're gonna get their macaron at the same time as like their sweet dessert in their sweet menu and things. And same with Italy. They have a big gluten-free pandemic because their whole culture's around pasta, but actually a lot of them are turning gluten-free. So to McDonald's, it was a very viable innovation that, dots connecting, which just works.
Yeah, no, it's a great kind of reduced example to the earlier part of our conversation. It makes me actually think about, you asked the question, what should startups think about? It's not just what they're trying to do in their part of the value chain, right? But what they're trying to do and how that contributes to all of the other factors and decision-making criteria of all the other players in the value chain. So the one that you highlighted for me, let's just capture as the retailer, right? The food service. Yeah. Something that's lost, I think, in a lot of times in your strategic, in your strategy building process, is there's just really simply put, right? There is like real estate considerations. So you're a McDonald's in the US, like you have a lease, you have to pay rent, right? You might have an idea of, if I carry macaroons, there's going to be a few people that are going to come like, oh wow, McDonald's got macaroons. That's a big risk, because what you're now doing is you're carrying this and not carrying something else. And that is actually a key thing that I think a lot of startups in particular take for granted, or they don't fully appreciate, is that there's an opportunity cost at the retail level. There's an opportunity cost at the distribution level. There's an opportunity, like from a truck space, if I carry this, that means I'm not carrying that. And you're always trying to optimize on a few things. You're trying to optimize on overall profitability of what you carry. And that's a function of velocity on top of unit economics and margin, right? What's the sell? When I put this on shelf, how quickly does it get off shelf? And how does that compare to what's on the shelf already? And in this massive equation, am I going to be able to cover my lease? Am I going to be able to pay my employees? Am I going to be able to manage my P&L? So a lot of, individuals, like particularly in food, they're like, sustainability, like, the CPG should work on this. And, if they offer more products, like that'll help solve this and this problem, or more nutrition. I'm like, it's not that easy. If you go, just really distill this down. If I were to go to a small mom and pop bodega in New York City, and I said, hey, there's this new product, I think the consumer's ready for it. And they're going to be like, are you sure? And I'm like, I think so. And I think if you have it and they see it, they're going to adopt it. If we're right through all our market research and, let's say activation to support a launch, then great. But if we're wrong, this bodega, this mom and pop show now has lost revenue from what they used to carry, which was, based on their own analysis and their sell-through, something that helped pay their bills. And that's a key challenge that actually it's a value chain challenge. It doesn't just start at any one segment, or let's say the startup CPG or the startup ingredient part.
I'm so glad you brought this up, because I'd forgotten about this. And I do think I want to sit on this point, because I do think it's so important, in that I remember vividly that the challenge isn't making the relationship with the supermarket. Say if your product's not in the supermarkets yet, no bodega, convenience store, just do some translation there. But if you're in a supermarket, it's not building the relationships with the buyer to get your product into the supermarket. Actually, the whole game is, can you stay in the supermarket? And that's really where the revenue generating. And so again, just to break this down, if there's an average consumer that you won't realize is actually the stacking of the shelves and the order of the stacking of the shelves. It isn't, things aren't just randomly placed on the shelf. There is an order and a science to how it is set out. So once you know this information, you'll see it every single time you go to the shops and where things are placed. But anything on an average eye level, so I'm 5'7", I generally sit within the average range for the average male, average female height. So I'm bang on where all the eye level of everything is. So if you see any products just at your eye level, you know that they are the top selling products that are shifting the most amount of stock. Now you'll have to correct me, this is where I get a bit hazy about the top and the bottom, but I remember rightly that the bottom is still a hot spot as well, because you start at the middle and you look down and you work well down the shelves. The ones that always get forgotten about, if you get relegated to the very top.
and you can reach it.
Yeah.
Reach the bottom, right? The top is like, oh, I might need some assistance from the grocery. Yeah.
There's an extra layer, there's an extra struggle, and if somebody has to go to any extra step within a process for somebody making that buy or not decision, you don't want to be on that top shelf. Basically, if you're on that top shelf, you need to do something with your marketing and get those products shifted fast.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So what you just triggered in my head, and just going back, right, to your earlier comment on advice for startups, right? Let's just say, it's the timing for scale is a really tricky part, because I come across startups that are really trying to push a lot of business development efforts with really large channels, nationwide distribution. So for me, there's like a few things around that. One is your ability to fulfill, right? Like in an ideal scenario, you would socialize your products, you build forecasts, and then you trigger your supply at a point where you feel good about these forecasts and your manufacturing capacity lines up with those forecasts with buffer, right? In the situation that your product sells faster and you improve your velocity, you can never not fulfill. And that's actually a huge risk, right? When you think about these major retailers, the last thing is that you have a successful product and you're like, hey, it's going to take me 3 more months before I can actually get a new product. Like very quickly, they'll be like, yeah, I don't have anything to put on that shelf now, and you're not getting back on it, right? I'm being very drastic about this, but
but I think being just showing how cutthroat they have to be. If you know it's that cutthroat, you understand the risk, you'd be a bit smarter with your decision making before wanting to try and obviously go into those negotiations.
Absolutely. And it's always good to have conversations. It's always good to be transparent, set expectations, like get them to like your product, get them to want your product, but don't overpromise your ability to deliver too quickly, particularly if your capacity is strapped, right? You now need to focus on how do I get the right capital in order to improve the capacity to fulfill these forecasts that have strong interest through these different channels that I've been spending time developing business through. The other key thing too is once you're on the shelf, right, you're basically, in a more official execution, you're providing some data to show what your sell-through looks like based on historic performance and historic channels that you've executed in. And you're using that to, build an argument with your new channel, being like, typically within a few days, my product's off the shelf. And I think if you start with the case, you're going to need this amount throughout the year. Like, okay, I get it. And that's actually meaningful business for me at my retail level. So I'm on board. But if you don't, now it's like, I'm just going to get rid of that case, but you're not going to go back in there because you're not selling
Yeah.
fast enough. I have other products that are competing in your categorical space that I think have better sell through, or I know have better sell through. So another key thing for me is, make sure that you're confident on what that velocity looks like. Make sure that your capacity allows for better than that performance. And the other key thing to add is activate it, right? Like if you're moving to a next stage of scale and you're going to now several new stores, several different channels, secure the capital, however way you want, dilutive funding or non-dilutive, however way you get your money, and put a A&M campaign, an advertising and marketing campaign together, and use that as part of your sell-in process. Is that, look, once this product is available to fulfill out of my warehouses in your retail channel, I'm going to spend X amount of dollars with Y amount of different marketing channels to help activate and promote it, pointing to your store to get to that sell-through promise and then and above, right? So timing all of those decisions, startups are like, hey, Sprouts is talking to me. This is great. Walmart, and I'm like, whoa, Walmart, Costco, these are your guys, right? Like, be hesitant to when you want to start really fulfilling, because you really only, I say one chance, I don't really mean one chance, but you don't have that many opportunities at that.
No, exactly. You don't want to ruin it. And the story that comes to mind, if you want to see an example of how not to do it. Now, fortunately, this story has a good ending, but I'm going to say they are in the 0.05%, and that was the founder of BrewDog. So now a multi-billion corporation around the world, selling beer, Scottish beer. And go and find his story on his LinkedIn, where he's openly comes out and gone, this was probably our dumbest thing we ever did. It was up there on like the list of, oh, this didn't go well. And so what he did was, they were averaging about 200 beers a week at that point. And then Tesco, which is the UK's largest supermarket, came around and was like, hey, we need it's still a small amount, but they were still like, well, we need like 10,000 a month. Or 10,000 a month or 10,000 a week. But it was a significant jump for him. And obviously beer, you can't just turn around beer in like a couple of days. There's a fermentation process that goes into it, and making it and bottling it and producing it. And I don't know, I still don't know how he did it, because he didn't divulge these details, but he managed to keep that supply chain going. But from the story that I was listening, I think it nearly killed him. Like it most certainly broke him. And the only thing that really, really saved him was his marketing. And because he's known for doing absolutely outrageous marketing stunts. Again, the very small percentage of marketing companies or marketers would even go and do, because they were ludicrous. But that was their brand, that was their messaging. And I think he was just in this very, very nice sweet spot, and a little bit of luck in going his way, and a lot of hard work to make that happen. But yeah, they also made that mistake as well, and they just about did it.
It's a common one. I mean, particularly if you don't have the industry expertise, it's almost like, I don't even understand how that could be a problem. If someone wants my product, fantastic. But then when they want it, and they really want it, and then you don't have the ability to fulfill, like you don't think about the repercussions of that. So then you kind of get into a stressful environment. I mean, in the example you provided, they were able to overcome it, which is fantastic. But a lot of companies, they say, right, that scaling is actually the challenge, and it's not just purely on the basis of like consumer adoption, right? It's the dance between capacity, business development with your channel, consumer adoption, how you spend your advertising and marketing dollars. On the flip side, the A&M piece too, a lot of individuals spend so much money on it, there's so much interest, and then it's like, wait a second, I don't have the capacity to even fulfill this interest. And you kind of wasted money, because that interest wanes the minute the campaign wanes. So it's trying to get all your core businesses, all your core business functions aligned towards the same strategy. That's something that's like in general, something that startups need to be a little bit more conscious of, and they learn, but it's maybe not something that comes to mind right at the onset.
No, and you just mentioned that, consumer interest then. So if I just very quickly summarize, we've talked about trying to time your scaling right. We've talked about, making sure your marketing is hot enough so you do have this nice supply of people wanting to buy your product as you're trying to drive it up, as well as almost going back to the core product itself and making sure that it is something that people want to buy. So if we tie this all together, then on an innovation standpoint, let's break it into two questions. Number one, how does a person even start by innovating that product that the consumers want? And if you then let's loop it into, are there some innovations or opportunities that you've spotted that people are not making the most of at the moment?
Okay. Let me answer the first question. The second question I have to think about. I had some comments that I wanted to share when you mentioned the free from.
Yeah.
And some of the challenges in that space. Remind me of that. I think I can tie it into that second part of the question. So the first part is market research, right? And this is interesting because at least for me, when I was younger in my career, I'm like, oh, market research. There's got to be an MBA approach to it, and there is, right? Like there is, and there's tools and there's methodologies, no question. But it's also like, what's happening? Like when I go to the supermarket, like what do I see out there? What do I see that I want? And it's not just me, that a lot of people want. That's part of a larger macro trend that's not there. Why isn't it there? The chances are it's not there because someone didn't bother innovating. And one thing I'll mention is that truly innovative products, they don't happen at the MNC level, right? Because there's an anomaly that happens there. Like MNCs have large bases, right? From a revenue standpoint, what you do has to impact that base, right? There's also lots of hard assets tied to the production of products for those particular companies that they have to leverage. So a lot of the game there is, how do I look at the tail of that capacity and those manufacturing assets and what I can actually create with them and try to innovate within them to adjust consumer needs. I also have big brands, and the brands have brand equity and target demographics, and they want things too. So let me understand them to understand what fits under my brand, what fits under my operational assets. I could always invest into capital, get new assets. I could partner with co-manufacturers. But that's kind of a dance that they're playing from a market research standpoint. So understand my brand, understand who purchases my brand. What do they want from the existing products? What do they want from new products that my brand can carry? And how does that lead to new concepts?
Yeah, that was, funny enough, that was actually my main piece at university. So again, just to contextualize it, I was studying the drinks market. The question was, develop a drink that's not on the market and prove that it will sell. That was the whole question. To cut a long story short, I chose a gin drink because at the time a new legislation had just come out in the UK on the distilling process, of which distillers could distill a smaller amount of gin in the UK than had previously. So this is like 2009 legislation, which then meant that a surge of independent gin makers was much more readily available in the UK because they could do these smaller batches rather than the bigger batches, which then in turn had brought on a gin and tonic trend in the UK for the younger drinkers. So rather than it being the moms who would drink it, it was actually the younger generation, the millennials, were kind of switching onto it. But it was still too early days for it to be fully fledged into the market. And I had all the market research available to me to show that there was a slight upward trend happening. So I developed a drink that was an independent gin base. It was kind of mixed into a premix of low sugar, very sweet. It was cold and it was gold, sorry, and the viscosity was increased, so I could put glitter in it. So when you grabbed the bottle, you'd spin it round, and it was this really cool, glittery, spinny drink. And it was very strong. You had it as a short drink. I think it was like 18%, but you had it as a short drink in a cocktail for a fancy bar, and obviously it had all of the gimmickiness and entertainment around it. So it fulfilled a lot of little ticks on what the millennial wanted, because they wanted experience, they wanted taste, they wanted low sugar, they wanted, independent gin, they wanted it localized. These are all the things where how we're going to market it out and things. And what the funny thing was, for the next 5 years, for the next 5 Christmases, at least one person bought me a gin bottle with that exact product that I had made in the labs. Because as soon as they saw it on the shelf, they were like, oh. And then I got it, and we went down a very premium liquid gold. And what I actually saw in the market was called a unicorn drink. Everybody went down this like unicorn bubblegum angle, and that's what I got for the next 5 years of Christmas.
Interesting. It's funny with gin. I like, when I think about like alcoholic drinking, I feel like society moves together and they get interested in certain categories and then bored. Once they hit the maturity of an S curve, and they kind of move to the next trend. So I'm just thinking about like, when I was younger, like beers as an example, it was just like American beers, right? You'd be lucky to find like a Heineken on tap. Hoegaarden broke through, and then you had a massive, I'm trying to think of the order here. You had a massive craft brew phase, which just got, honestly, too much, too confusing. Yeah. Even when I bought it, when you went to a retail store, it's like you couldn't even buy the same thing twice because they're already turning it over for like the next, product that they now decided to carry.
Would we say Guinness is the latest trend, or is that just my peripheral in New York?
From beer perspective?
Yeah, I get Guinness a lot.
Do you really?
Yeah, this is the thing about peripherals. I'm saying peripheral because my friends are all in their 30s. Obviously my friends are American, but I do have a lot of expats where I live and things, and the Guinness seems to be the drink of choice just around what I'm seeing.
I stopped drinking beer. It's probably been like over 15 years since I last had a beer, so I can't comment. I actually ended. I went through the whole phase of like, it's so long, right? The Belgium ales and the IPAs were, I think, right before that. I ended with the stouts and like the really dark, like they were just decadent, right? And really delicious. But then there was like a big wine craze. Wine's obviously always popular, but you had more of, I would say, the demographic in wine. Then you had the single malts, right? Everyone wanted a single malt. The Japanese got into the single malts, like that was like top of mind. Bourbon became top of mind. Vodka somewhere along the lines there. I feel like tequila, right? Mezcal's having their heyday. So anyway, the reason why I even brought this up is I was talking to my wife. I'm like, gin, I think that's next, right? Like if you could buy whatever gin barrels now, I don't know if you ever come across the bourbon barrelers. They're like, well, compare S&P 500, and you would have made so much if you bought a barrel back then. I'm like, buy gin barrels, right? That's a bet that I'm not willing to make, but if in case someone's in that industry, I'd make it if I was them.
Absolutely, because I know it's not that trend hasn't come over across the pond, but I know we have UK-US, we have such a close relationship where if we've been drinking, as UK, we've been drinking gin now for 10 years and it's still fairly strong as a trend. It's died off a lot more than it was. But, the next generation have come through and they've put their own mark on things. That's the other thing to think about. If you're a startup and you're trying to think, which audience am I trying to appeal to? You're not trying to appeal to everybody. You don't want to appeal to everybody, but who does have purchasing power? The millennials were such a strong one because we disposable income, but so do the baby boomers because they've been holding on to the income. And just thinking about these economics when looking who's going around the supermarkets, And another layer on top of that is, again, are they going to bodegas? Are they shopping online? Are they shopping in supermarkets? We now have so much different technology changes on top of that. It's almost dizzying. Like,
Yeah.
we're even scratching the surface on what a startup needs to think about in just this last 40 minutes, you know?
Well, I'm just the impetus, right, for the idea, right? We talked about several different things. Like, I brought up, like, you have a mature platform already, right? A big brand and a loyal user base. So how do you innovate within that? You talk more about innovation at a category level of, let's say, spirits, and like, how do you do and that? And in both are very viable ways. Other ways that I kind of wanted to think through with you, or talk through with you, you start to think about certain demographics, and like, yeah, make some broad analyses. Like, they have X amount of dollars. How do they spend their X amount of dollars throughout the day? How are they saving? What are they saving to spend on? And you start to kind of intersect. Well, it's like, okay, they're looking, from a CPG perspective at these types of products. This is what's important to health and wellness. This, and this. Okay, well, what do they have today as options, right? Like, try to understand the landscape. Try to address the white space of that particular landscape. What do I want? What do my friends want? What are the extension of that wants? How do I know, like, my generation or another generation? Establish the white space, use that to distill down a concept, right? Test the concept however way you want, surveys, family and friends. There's lots of different ways to do it. I think the luxury of a startup is you don't have an existing base to work at, right? There's no margin dilution, because there is no margin. There's no margin neutrality or margin accretion. There's no, how do I add 5% growth to zero? It's pretty easy, right? So when it comes to, like, those types of financial motivators, you don't necessarily need them. You just need to feel good about a concept and its opportunity. To the extent you can understand TAMs and how, like, that overall thesis will grow over time, and your competition and the market share you think you'll be able to attain from that, and of the growth that comes over time, that great. But at the level that you're starting, one, you probably don't have the wherewithal financially or experience-wise to do this kind of soup to nuts analysis, nor do you need to, right? So if you develop a concept that is, it could be me too, right? It's like, hey, this one's really working, but people want optionality. I just need to do something slightly different in order to create that optionality, but I believe in the space, and that's my concept. That's my market research, right? Or you can go truly novel, and then say, like, hey, there's no free-from materials that taste the way it should taste for someone that needs free-from materials, right? It's interesting because, like, I don't know if I think about, like, a classic consumer learning program. One, you have your market research, your concept that's derived from it based on this opportunity you've determined. Includes elements of the proposition, the flavor, the other ingredients that you need, the cost constraints, the packaging, so on and so forth. And then you can test that concept, and then distill it down with R&D feasibility first. Can I actually reduce it down to something real? And then you can test that particular product. I wonder if these free-from products, one, the innovators that are going after them are likely still small, because I think the actual overall demographic that's looking for them is not of materiality for the large organizations that have robust programs in place. So they're probably just assessing it, maybe not even as a user, right? They're giving it to a general pop that's like, hey, what do you think of this free-from product? Be like, oh yeah, it's great. It tastes like the with product, right? The not free-from. Where what they probably should be doing is like, hey, you have this, condition. You're looking for this product. Your taste buds must be altered because they haven't developed to eat products with these particular, constraints, right? Yeah. So what do you think? And I think that's a key. Does the sample of demographic that you're going to test with needs to be representative of who you're targeting from a sales perspective.
Absolutely. I love that you have both brought this up. And so 2 points here. If you are a startup and you are still small, enjoy it. It feels hard to be in that small space for a very long time, but like you said, as soon as the big systems come in, the big money, the big infrastructure, it's so hard to make changes. It's so much more costly. So when you're small, do as much testing as possible with as many people as possible, with who you're trying to aim to target for, and you'll do far better in the long run. And then to the free from, I think you are right, because for people who don't know, from a actual biological standpoint, if you have you have an allergy, your body is predisposed to not like it. So if there are foods in your diet, this is just the average person, and you just really, really don't like certain foods, and I'll give you an example. It's like cilantro tastes soapy to people. It's not always the case, but a lot of the case is actually the first indications that you've got an intolerance to that food. My dad being the classic example. 50 years of his life just didn't like eggs, just eggs on a plate. He's just always said, hate eggs. Going through the allergen testings with me, he was like, I'll do it with you. Anyway, first thing to come up, eggs. Like, he's trying to eat eggs, he's not going to have any visceral reaction, but he just knows he just doesn't really like them. But sure enough, they came up in his allergens test that he has a very low level where the body just wants to go no. And for me, it's hard to explain to people that I have a dairy and gluten allergy. If you put bread in a toaster, that toast smell that most people love and enjoy smells disgusting to me. And then milk and cheese, like somebody was eating a Caesar salad in front of me the other day. Oh my God, it smelled disgusting. But those are smells that most people perceive to be really delicious and really tasty. And for me, I'm just like, oh, that's disgusting, that's horrible. Because my body knows that if I eat those things, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good for me, basically.
Yeah.
You know?
I think you're totally right. I mean, on the allergy basis, but also preferences change, right? Like, acclimation's a real thing. Like, if you have a certain amount of sugar, there's reward pathways. Like, you will want it, you will need it, and your preference for it is there, and you can wean off of it, right? Same thing with not just like these macronutrients or specific macronutrients, but just in general with preference. Like, you kind of, you fall into, I think, a mental routine. Like, hey, I eat that product, I like that product, I want more of that product. But then you also like actually start to develop a taste for it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's another key factor, right? Like, I had a question to some friends that are like lifelong vegetarians. I'm like, you guys eat some of the plant-based meat mimicry products. Like, does that have a place for you because you never sought after meat to begin with? Like, now that you have a plant-based option, is that? And it's a pretty mixed result, right? Like, some of them are like, I don't like the taste of it. It's like, well, I get it, because you're not used to eating meat in your diet. But something like this is interesting just because it's optionality, right? That's the other thing too, right? People want new. So if you can offer them new and it fits the constraints of their lifestyle and consumption behaviors, then you can start to get that adoption over time.
And if the classic example is Beyond Meat, they have really been trailblazers in the substitute meat market. Like, I'm not vegetarian. I think if I went vegan or vegetarian, I'll have nothing left in my diet. But I did notice, my attention, that they didn't really go heavy on the supermarket angle. They actually went heavy on the supply chain of restaurants angles, because it's really, restaurants also are having to cater to lots of different allergies and to provide innovation and experience and convenience and taste. They're all doing the same things. And actually, it's convenient for the restaurant to have a reliable product that services an ICP, like a persona, in their burgers. And from a strategic channel approach, I think they've nailed it, because everybody loves them, they rave about them, and they get to enjoy it at the restaurant. Now, we're going to bring this podcast kind of towards the end, and it's been so action-packed. Is there one piece of advice that you just want to leave the startup with on today's podcast? There you go.
One piece of advice. I think trying to tie all of it together, right? And something I've always mentioned, like benchmark. Find out who you're competing with. Even if it's no one, you're still competing with someone, right? Because someone has an incumbent product in the consumption space that you're looking to introduce your product into, right? And you need to understand everything about it, from a cost perspective, from a packaging perspective, from a taste perspective, from a nutrition perspective, from a channel perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a brand perspective. And you need to kind of distill that down into what your concept will be. And it's not that you need to compete on every single angle, right? Like, you just need to understand it and figure out what your differentiators are. Along with the benchmark, I mentioned cost, and I think when I say that, it's easy to take that as your MSRP and your consumer standpoint. But what's also super important is, what are the margins for you, for your new concept, in competition with these other products? And I say that for a few reasons. One, you need to have profitability to reinvest in yourself and use that to grow. There's always capital events that can help you along the way. But something that's they're tied together. When you look at like anyone with capital that's looking to invest, right? The longer term plan, there's an exit, right? And you need to now compete with the incumbent again on a margin profile basis, right? On a volumetric basis, on a velocity basis. You can always improve margin through productivity initiatives, right? So usually top line and gross is top of mind. And if your margin's quote unquote healthy enough, right, economies of scale will kind of do a lot of the work for you. But if your starting point is low, then you will have a challenge, right? And especially if you think about acquisition, and if it's like, once you establish yourself and once you got to a significant base, and that base now is a focus for a large company. Another way of putting it is, you've crossed the chasm, right? From your 10% lead users into interested buyers, 25%, let's say, you've now moved into the 50% of your bell curve, like the main population, right? There's a revenue attached to that. There's an adoption attached to that. There's a capacity, production scale attached to that. There's an interest level attached to that. All those things could be very permissive. And now your acquisition, they have to build a thesis. Okay, I can distribute that product in ways that they couldn't. I can bring down the cost in ways that they couldn't, because I'm tying it to my bigger system. But if your margin profile isn't benchmarked with the other category players, they might not be able to. And if they're not able to, and it impacts their enterprise margin and it's dilutive, like, that is a non-obvious reason for that not to be an exit strategy for that startup. So I honed in on that specific one.
Yeah. That's great, because at the end of the day, no matter what business that you're doing, cash is king.
Cash is king.
You've got cash, you can fix anything. Trust me.
Healthy financials. It's not just cash. Healthy financials. Growth plan on a top level, but also productivity on the bottom level, in competition with your other category players. And it all comes down to benchmarking. Know who you're competing with.
Exactly. And I'll leave you with one final story. And it's, if anybody wants to go read more about this, is Babybel. Babybel, their cost of making one Babybel, I think it's about break even to actually they lose money by making one. But because they have huge economies of scale, that is actually where they get their profit margins in place. And that's why you can only buy Babybel, the cheese, in packs of 10. So it forces the user to make sure that they're always profitable every time they do production.
Sorry, real quick. That's a great example. And I think the other thing I'd mention is, like, when I work with a lot of VCs, right? And I'm not pointing, because the VCs know this. I definitely know this now. But VCs in food and beverage, or venture capital, I should say, in food and beverage, is so different than like tech, right? Because of what you're describing, the overhead required in order to get to profitability, absorbing that overhead. It's not like 5 programmers as in a SaaS model. There's people running a plant, there's capital infrastructure, there's steel. Volume is the key to the game. It ties to the fast moving part of FMCG. So it's a completely different ballgame when you think about scaling in food versus these other startup spaces like electronics and technology and so on.
So we could talk about this for hours. There's tons of things we done to this. Like this is why I was really excited about today, because there is just layers to all of this, and this podcast is here to help every business, and we started the podcast today saying food businesses are one of the hardest to do because of all of these extra layers and complexities. And I think we've painted a very small picture, because this picture should go bigger and bigger, about that. So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you to dig more into this, because this has only been a bit of a flavour, where can they reach you on?
Yeah, I'm always open to having discussions. I like sharing, my knowledge, honestly, just from like a passion standpoint, curiosity standpoint. So LinkedIn, you can message me. Obviously, the time is it's critical. I don't have too much time, but I always like to carve out time to have these discussions. So I encourage it, right? And you know what? Just in general, I had a lot of fun. This was great. I didn't know exactly where the conversation was going to go, and but I really enjoyed that. I had a lot of fun.
Amazing. So we would say LinkedIn, it's the best place.
I would say LinkedIn's would be a great start.
Perfect. Well, I always put the links in the description, and basically so people can click on them straight away and get in touch with you. Once again, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I could geek on this all day. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, likewise. Let me know if you want to consider a part 2 at some point. But again, had a ton of fun.
I'm there for it. Let's book it in. Let's do it. See you soon.
Sounds good. Okay.